Hi, folks. Sorry for delay. Our recruiting meeting went over. So as always, the meeting has been is recording already. I will go ahead and share my screen and agenda as well. A second while I pull up the charts. Let's start with the throughputs first. I think this was last month was one of the highest months we have so far. Christopher, would you like to chime in on the metrics?
Yeah, so on the MRs merged per month, we basically did have our highest month so far. The including community contributions was at 2097. We were just 3 MRs short of 2100. That converted to basically our goal was to increase by about 20% throughput peak to peak between the 2 months. So we hit 85% of it. If you would have done, we did 1791 the previous one, so it's like basically 360 additional MRs we were shooting for. We hit about 300 of those 360. So that's, do the math, it's roughly 85% of our goal from an OKR perspective. Pretty happy about that result.
Great. Yeah, I love seeing the trend line being under the bar chart now, where it says over, or like treading water.
I didn't even notice that. That's true. That's a it'll be interesting to see. We have August, September, and October. August actually has 22 working days, so we may actually see August be the higher runner. Though September and October will obviously have additional people ramping, and none of those fall into either contribute or holiday month. So it'll be interesting to see how those kind of 3 months play out. So we may see general progression, but I would expect it may be a little bit lighter towards the end of the quarter. Just what my gut tells me from that perspective.
Got it. Awesome. Moving on to the next one. Per author is going up as well. Any comments from you?
Yeah, specifically, we've kind of stabilized. One of the things we've noticed is there was a negative correlation between hiring and essentially average MRs per author. So we've kind of acknowledged that we're not quite back to 10, but we're wanting to keep in that 8 to 10 range. And we definitely did that in the past quarter, contribute withstanding. The one aspect is I would love to see a 9 in there, but we're not trending as well as we would hope there at this point.
Do you see this affecting closing out the working group? Do we need to reach 9? What are your thoughts?
I need to. Eric and I have talked about this. He had an additional item for things we need to try. I don't think that would close out the working group, though. I think that'd be more of a development initiative. So I don't think. That's a good call out that I still need to circle back with him. And since I was out last week, I really didn't have a chance to follow up on that specific one.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. Moving on to the last one. So we were still monitoring this. I did change the exit criteria not to cover aggressively or lowering the number because I don't think it will go lower. Josh may speak more to this, but we have made some improvements and adding more metrics to help teams groom their backlog better, and also focusing on P1s and P2. So that should help in the interim. We probably need to keep an eye on this and hoping to see this trend lower. With that, I'm moving back to the agenda and stop sharing my screen so we can see each other better. Craig, would you like to touch on the hypothesis? Anything you want to update here?
I think since Christopher's here, we can talk about closing them both out, I believe. So let me just turn over and I can share. All right, so on hypothesis 8, the hypothesis was that new engineers come in with a different methodology where they have smaller MRs, larger MRs. Oh, geez, let me get it backwards, sorry. Come in different methodology compared to those longer tenured, more productive. So, yeah, the hypothesis of saying that new engineers come in with smaller MRs, and actually the trends that I'm seeing in the data prove the opposite or show the opposite. So this chart on the left is showing engineers who have less than a year's worth of tenure and actually their MR size. And the only metric we have is actually a file size count. So the number of files that are affected in the MR, which is one unit of measurement, right? It's not the only. It's showing that over time they actually get smaller. And then Christopher in Slack asked me, so what's the trend over time of everybody? And this is actually the trend of all the data over time. And there's no trend. It's kind of up and down, right? On the average number of files affected by MR, inclusive of everything in that CSV that I downloaded. So, and the number across the bottom is just the spread of between created and merged. Or I'm sorry, tenure. Yeah.
So people with more tenure work on less files?
No, it's the files in the MR, the number of files that are changed within the MR. So this is the average of the files affected. So yeah, I guess the answer is yes.
Okay, but we haven't seen a trend where we're, you're saying since 2018, in the last year and a half, we haven't seen a change in trend?
No, it's staying between 4 and 6.
But it doesn't capture the size of changes in that file, correct? It's just the number of files.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't believe we capture that metric, the number of lines changed. I think it's just files affected. So we may see something completely different if we captured the amount of code that was changed.
I see.
And I couldn't find anywhere where we actually gather that information. So
we think that 8 is false, is what I'm hearing.
Mm-hmm. Just based on this view, if we had content of file, that could prove us differently, but I don't believe we have that data. But based on the data we have, it is not proving 8 to be true.
So the MR doesn't have those fields for changes of code. They just have the change files. Interesting. I guess you could, the only way you could do it is if you pulled the commits.
Yeah.
Ugh. All right.
It may be there. I just couldn't find it based on the information that I have. So.
Now, who's the best person on your team who would know?
I would say Remy and Mark. Are we talking about the database, what we need to pull to show the commits or the sizes, correct?
Yeah, it'd be either sizes or commits that then you could somehow cross-correlate to either commits table or otherwise.
Yeah, I would say Remy or Mark, because they've been working on the ingesting of the data. Like Mark, do you have anything to add here? Like, you know what database table that we should be looking at in terms of commits?
So where was the data pulled from? Was it pulled from the Insights CSV?
No, actually, I had to call into the API to get the changes count in the field. So I pulled down the CSV with all of the merge requests, and then I went through an API and just called the changes count for each of those merge requests in there.
Okay. Yeah. I'm not sure off the top of my head what is available. Maybe the diffs we can retrieve and then do something with that.
Yeah, that's essentially what we want is the diff summary. If you do like a get diff summary, it'll give you like the number of lines changed. And I think that would be a good proxy. Like I feel like the number of files change is not necessarily a good proxy, but lines changed is a good proxy. It's not necessarily lines of code, but let's just do a first order or assume a first order with that. That's what we're looking for. And there's two ways you can potentially do that. One way is you get all the commits that are associated with it, and then you go figure out what the changes are associated with it, and then that's how you count it. The other way is if the MR actually had that data in it.
Yeah, I think we can certainly look into it.
Okay. All right. Yeah, really just want to know if the field's available. If not, then we can just mark this one red and say, based on this analysis, we're saying it doesn't correlate.
Yeah, through the API, the only thing I could find was that changes count. So
It could be that we don't have an API for that, and we need to request the Create team to build one. Another leapfrog move we could do is just do this in Periscope in the next iteration and just request that table be imported as part of this.
And if it's the merge request diff files table, that's the biggest table we have in the database. It's over a terabyte. That's the one I was talking about earlier, Christopher.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, Andreas.
Okay. So Mark, you'll take that action to
I can look into it.
Give us feedback. Okay.
Okay. So is the next working group meeting okay to follow up, or do you want anything faster than that?
I don't want anything faster than that. I would ask Mark if that's feasible for next week. Okay. I'll take a nod as yes.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Okay. Would we like to go to the number 9?
Yeah, so the where we left it off last was when Christopher was last with us. We were looking at this graph, and so we go back. The peaks where we had the highest averages were this one, so June 2018 and January 2018. If we look at the velocity charts on throughput, those were the 2 peaks that we had. And we overlaid it with our growth in hiring around that same time. So we were relatively flat throughout this period. We had a couple peaks in velocity, number of MRs that came through, and then our hiring from June of 2018 on, it's not exponential, but certainly rapidly increased over this time. And that's the only line we could draw to the correlation of our throughput going down at that point, just onboarding so many new engineers. And engineers is the yellow line, but they all follow the same trend there. So that's why we were considering closing this one, as the correlation of all the onboarding and hiring did contribute to throughput reducing. But wanted Christopher to confirm.
Yeah, I'm good with that. I'm good with that aspect of it. I think we've got sufficient information on.
Okay. So we just mark that one as green then. Right.
And these are being pulled from Team YAML, correct? When we differentiate engineers and employees and all.
Yes. Yep. So pulling in from Team YAML, looked at did a lot of data cleanup on titles and made sure to exclude anyone from the CSV download, the author name that was not in Team YAML. So yellow only includes folks that were in the Team YAML file. Engineers. And then employees is everyone that's in Team YAML, and then all just includes everybody that was in the CSV download.
Is engineers anybody who's under development, or just anybody with the engineer title?
Yeah, it was in anybody with engineer. I didn't go into departments. I just went strictly off title. It was a pretty rough.
Okay. All right. Your label's good. One thing that we're talking about is whether or not we actually do it specifically to the development department.
Mm-hmm.
So because of that, we've been using the term developers, but your label's correct here. I would have asked for it to change if it was based on the development department's hierarchy.
Yeah, I found that the departments weren't as clean as the titles, so I just went with a title cut.
Yeah,
we have lots of good engineers outside the development department.
I'm sure.
Like to make that explicit. Lots of good technical people outside the development department. So because of that, that's the kind of the distinction we're trying to make here.
Cool. All right.
Great. Yep, coloring is coming in. This is, I forgot the color notation now. It's red, correct?
Green means valid, proven, black means in progress, and red means invalidated.
Invalidated, okay.
So it's green now in the agenda.
Awesome. We have only one left. Cool, let's jump onto the rest of the agenda. We've added new charts per the request from last time. This is the delivered deliverables versus other issues, and this would also allow Joshua to to add this data directly to his spreadsheet as well. So let me just share my screen so I can show you that. So now we have, for every milestone, these are the total delivered issues with closed issues for that milestone within the scope of the projects listed here. And the green ones are the deliverables that we close in that milestone. And when pairing this chart with the missed deliverables, we can just stack them and you can get analysis of what was missed in that milestone and what was delivered, what was closed. Any discussions that we'd like to have here?
Is missed just missed, or is it the missed plus deliverables?
Missed plus deliverables. Correct.
Okay, so it is the, okay, great. Okay. Because I know that was one of the questions we had before about the ratio. So, okay.
Yep, I did some spot check. Like it is actually correct. If you look at the issue tracker, it's 43 because somebody added one manually last night, or after this thing happened. But it is be 43 tomorrow, and it's the same as what the tracker says. If you look for missed deliverables, missed 12.0 label.
Right, and we're in the middle of 12.2, right?
We're in the middle of 12.2.
Yeah. So this, Josh and I had a discussion about this yesterday, or feels like 2 months ago. Basically, the ratio of deliverables to undefined closed issues is just unbelievably high.
This one, correct?
Yeah, and the question would be is whether or not we should be going back and having the team, like it just feels like if 25%, 75% of the work is undefined, it just feels like we're not anywhere even close to matching up with expectations here. At least that's kind of my take on it from that perspective. So we were trying to figure out, should we go back? Because Josh did find a couple teams that weren't labeling. So that's the first problem, is hygiene. And, should we actually be asking teams to go back and mark things as deliverables if they were intended for that release and just never got marked correctly?
I'll leave it up to Josh. I think it makes sense. Does this correlate with any assumptions you've had before in terms of why we're not, some of these were missed because we're not aligning the deliverable issues for that milestone? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I don't have a good theory on the non-deliverables and that volume. I actually don't know, so I think I'd be curious to double click. I think obviously part of the contributing factor here is that we aren't labeling it reliably, so we need to figure that out. But I'm not sure why that would happen, unless we're not going in and labeling them midstream, right? So if a bug comes in, for example, after planning happened, we're not going in and then labeling it as deliverable. So that's possible. The other thing I've noticed is that some teams use stretch, which I thought we sort of got away from. So we don't have a good standardized process here. I would much prefer to use deliverable and then have a single prioritized list. But some folks have deliverable versus stretch still. So I think we need to standardize the process that I think will go a long way to help make that chart useful. Because right now, if not everyone uses it, the hygiene problems are sort of all over the map. So I will do that as far as the planning process. I'll get that done this week. And that should hopefully work well. And then we'll hopefully have an ask for the teams, potentially, PME maybe, to see if we can go back and back label some of these things. Maybe just one release just to see if we can try and clean up some of the data and see if we can use that to start forming some better informed hypotheses around what's actually happening here.
Yeah, and it's important it's good to note that this is also now, you put this also on the team pages. So the stages are listed in this fashion. So this may make it actually pretty easy for teams to figure out, okay, this team is Josh, you may I'm not trying to get anybody in trouble, but if you can give me the stages where people aren't doing it, because I'd love to cross check that list versus, what we're seeing in the data, and if there's some additional discussions that might be worth having in parallel to that.
Yeah, I can send that along, at least as I find them. The rationale for the stretch was, I think, that they had some really critical issues that they wanted to try and deliver, like 3 of them. And so they made those the only deliverables for the entire release, entire milestone. And then all the rest of the stuff was in stretch. Just to make it, super clear that these 3 were, the most important things. So
which team or group was that? Or which stage or group was that?
That was the runner team.
The runner team.
Now, I think in 12.4, we're back to deliverables.
So which that was 12.1's release or 12.2?
12.3.
12.3. They don't even have it listed. 12.3 for runner.
Here. So if you look at this, I'll just put it here under my item. This is an example of the 12.3 board. So if you click into that, you'll see that there's quite a lot of. Oh, I lost the. Shoot. I need to fix the link. And you have these long links; they don't face correctly.
Are you talking about the dashboard, Josh? Yeah, I'll help here as well.
I think I got it. That issue board should do it. So think of the issue board. All right, hold on. Jeez. Edits. Fix the link. Now it says 404. Okay, whatever. I'll fix the. Why is this such a pain?
I did the same thing you did, Matt, because I went to the section and I'm seeing 12.1 and 12.2, but I'm not seeing 12.3.
Okay, so if you click, I fixed the link. If you look at the link now, the board, you'll see the planning board for 12.3, and you can see that there's 4 deliverables now and 5 stretches.
So this is interesting because I don't see here. Let me project. I do not see anything in this section in 12.3.
It hasn't been completed yet, right?
Okay, got it. Okay, so we need to look at the board. Sorry about that. Okay.
Would it help if we stacked on stretch in these charts to add the stretch above to see?
What's the behavior? And this is like taking Christopher's playbook. What's the behavior we want to encourage? Because if we want to move away from the stretch, let's not put it in.
Right, okay.
I think we should simplify, like deliverable, the rest is stretched by default. And I don't know, Josh, I'll leave it up to you how you want to.
I agree. I think what we've been doing, the product team has some discussions, is that you make a prioritized list and then however you want to try and go through the planning process, but the deliverable label kind of signifies the cut line for like the planning for that release. And then things below that would be sort of nice to have if you get there, but that's not in the planning for the release.
Yep. I was doing some spot checks. There are teams that do I think better than others, since we're looking at it now. Like I would love to see something like this. The alignment is good here.
You aren't sharing your screen.
Oops, sorry. I was looking at package.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to reconcile in my head is and Mark, maybe this is something to think about. You were asking about with the label is if it's undefined, I could see if it's a bug that we list out the bugs. If bugs are marked deliverable, then they go in the deliverable. If they're not, if bugs are marked undefined or not marked deliverable, then we mark them. We have that category. Does that make sense? So like the rules is the most important thing. Those are the things we committed to. Or that we said this is above the cut line when we were doing planning. bugs is things that we fixed that, just, stuff happens and we prioritize that. And then there's still this category of undefined. And what I'm trying to reconcile in my head is like right now, the way it looks at it is like, even if with the 200 bugs on top of that, it's still like 50% of our work is undefined. And like what Josh is seeing is that like, for the things that we supposedly project in our calls is 50%, we're only hitting 50% of those targets. So there's something that's just not making sense to me, because it's not above the cut line. It's not above the cut line when we prioritize it, yet it's so important that 50% of our work is undefined, right? Like not even talked about is kind of the way I'm doing it. And that could very well be very important things that engineering needs to be doing, but like it still feels like the 100% prioritization is not happening. That would be my assertion at this point based on the data that's being presented. And I'm just kind of scratching my head still on what's going on.
So, new guy question, is there a definition somewhere in the handbook on what is a deliverable versus what is not? I'm looking at the memory team, and the deliverable label, this is really the first time I've heard of this. Might be my fault, but most of ours are not labeled as deliverable. Our chart's pretty awful.
Yeah, it's basically issue, like if the description is issues scheduled for the current milestone, which is what I think the intention is. So like if you go through planning, you have a bunch of stuff on the 12.3, 12.4 board for your group. Deliverable can act as the cut line when you're going through and planning. That how you can sort of allocate what's planned and what's scheduled for the current milestone versus some stuff which might still be left around from the milestone or not didn't get in the cut line for the milestone or things like that.
Okay, so then thank you for that clarification. I'll start paying more attention to that. What about things that are discovered in the middle of a milestone? So like if we start working on an issue and we discover we need to do 2 more issues immediately within that milestone, do we then mark those as well as deliverables, even though they weren't planned prior to the kickoff or the start of the milestone?
Yeah, that's I think the question we need to answer. The same thing goes for like, you ship 12.2 and you find 3 bugs that are pretty high priority and you just jump on them.
Yeah.
And should you just and then you're gonna work on them and you're then gonna go push out potentially some things you did plan on to a later release. So I think the question is, how do we, what do we want to do in that situation? Do we want to try and track like how much of what we planned makes it through, or is it more of a plan versus unplanned? Well, I guess if it's just plan versus unplanned, you still want to then try and track some of this stuff, but like as in what originally made it in. But I feel like we need some provision, some good process to deal with these things that come up, right? Like a bug or whatnot.
That's how I was originally viewing these charts, is the green was planned and the gray was unplanned. But I think there's a combination of not knowing we need to label these as deliverable. And I think if we want to do the plan versus unplanned, we need to be explicit. Otherwise, we're probably muddying the waters there. So,
yeah, I think it goes back to, I think, what ultimate metrics do you want to get from this? I think the workflow around the cut line is helpful and useful, right? So as a PM, I have a prioritized list. The engineering manager can just go through and say, bing, 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 and we stop here, right? I think that works out really well. And then the question then is, for another use of it, which is planned versus unplanned, how should we handle these midstream changes, right? Because PMs also don't want to be stuck in a situation where, we find something else more important to work on, even if it's not a bug, and we don't feel like we can shift it because we're going to be docked for unplanned work.
Right.
So we should try and stay as agile as we possibly can. But so I think that's the question around sort of the plan versus unplanned work.
Okay. In the interest of time, I think we should follow up on this point the next time. I think this is the most important one: alignment on prioritization. So let's get.
And Josh, you have one quick thought, Mac, is Josh, you have an action item from yesterday's discussion where you're going to update the handbook to better reflect kind of what we're going to document, Greg. So we are working towards that. It's not there yet.
I was just going to say that I'll have an MR up here today or tomorrow, and we can do a little asynchronous discussion in the MR.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Yes.
Okay. No, I just said thanks. Sorry.
Okay. I'm taking on the last one. So update on label migration. 80% of the data should be correct already. There's still some edge cases where there are multiple team labels that our team will still work through, but it should be kosher now and answer all our questions. I will review the exit criteria next time around. I think we've been making a lot of progress. So let's talk about that next time for the interest of time. Thank you, Mark, for taking the investigative work on and the work on label migration. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Mark.
See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.